I'm happy to help.
You can get one for $6.
Thank you for supporting.
Yeah, look at a water. All right.
Okay, let's get going. This is a special meeting of the Hollister City Council on June 26, 2023. The meeting is now called to order. It is 5:01 p.m. Deputy City Clerk, are there any public comments on closed session?
No, Mayor, no comments.
All right, City Attorney, can you announce the closed session items?
Yes, the city council will be discussing two items in closed session. The first is conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated representative is City Attorney Mary Lerner, and the employee organization are the unrepresented employees in classifications designated as executive management. And they will also be discussing a consultation of Public Employment Government Code Section 54957, public employee performance evaluation for the interim city manager.
Great. Can I get a motion to adjourn to closed session? Is there a second? All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries 5-0.
So. Did you want to speak or you're just here to hang out?
Oh, I think it's like, wow.
Okay, so we're gonna be behind closed Thanks.
Time to go. We ready to go? All
Yes,
right.
we are.
So we'll now reconvene our special meeting of the Hollister City Council. It is 6:05 PM. Councilmember Perez, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Deputy City Clerk, can you call roll, please?
Council members Perez,
Present.
Resendez,
Present.
Morales, Burns,
Here.
Mayor Casey.
Here.
Thank you. Today's meeting agenda was duly noticed and posted in accordance with Government Code Section 54956 at the City Hall Bulletin Board on June 23rd, 2023 at 5:35 PM.
Okay. City Attorney, is there any reportable action from closed session?
No, there's nothing to report.
All right. Would any members of the council or members of the public like to pull an item from the consent agenda? No.
I do have a public comment for item number 1 on consent.
So do we need to pull it or do we?
I don't believe we need to pull, but he could make a comment.
Okay, so we could take a comment.
Adam Bell.
Thank you for supporting our new location. We're looking forward to our future for our special friends. It means a lot and it makes me feel that we are making it happen for us. And it makes me happy and seeing where our new location's gonna. And thank you for our future. Our friends are going to love the idea of what we are going to do for our new location. And I hope we can move forward with this. And I'm hoping we can do something with this because it means a lot to me. So thank you for letting me speak and thank you for hearing us what we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Hey, do we have any other comments or
No, ma'am.
you're good? Okay. So can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Right, so we're going to move on to council business. Item 1 is to establish an ad hoc committee to work with the San Benito Healthcare District. Can we have a staff report? Or is there one?
Good evening, Mayor Casey. So at our June 20th meeting, you did request that this item come back and you receive council consensus. So we're bringing it back here this evening. The recommendation is to create a new ad hoc committee to work with the San Benito Healthcare District. And as mentioned on the 20th, Mayor Casey and Councilmember Perez to serve on that committee.
Thank you. So do we have any questions from council? Yes, Councilmember Resendez.
Thank you. So Mayor Mia Casey and Councilmember Rick Perez are on which committee? I'm sorry.
This would be for the ad hoc to work with the hospital. So
Okay.
on the 20th, at the end of the meeting, Mayor Casey asked for consensus on that and for us to bring it back.
Got it. So I sit on the intergovernmental with the mayor, and I don't remember there being a conversation. I'm wondering if I missed something about Hazel Hawkins Hospital no longer going to intergovernmental.
left early, I think, at the last meeting, and we discussed it at the end of the meeting. So the county has decided to, well, they worked with the health district and decided to create these ad hocs to sit with the district directly, and they pulled the item from intergovernmental. That was a decision I think they made a week ago or so, 2 weeks ago.
Okay, and the reason for this ad hoc committee?
Informational, to share information and to try to foster more positive interactions.
Okay, so information going out to the public. So,
Yes, well, for us to share here and for the county to have, to also be able to share so that we're all on the same page since things are changing rapidly.
will the public be included in these meetings at the hospital?
Not in an ad hoc meeting, no, but that's the
Ah.
purpose, is for us to come. That's the way ad hocs work. And the public would hear from us here on the dais on what the latest is.
Okay. Yeah, so I do have some concerns about that. It feels like the intergovernmental is probably the most appropriate place for them to have those discussions and to continue to have them so that the public is aware of what's going on. I think that we want to foster a positive, transparent relationship. But at this point, I don't have that much faith in the hospital. I feel like this is an effort from people to keep information behind closed doors and try to control the narrative that the hospital wants to give the public, but we need to include the public in this discussion. We need to be transparent with them. And frankly, at this point, we should have the CEO fired and the entire board at the hospital recalled or not sitting there because of the financial problems that they put the hospital in. So I cannot support having an ad hoc, especially if you did do that, then I would ask that I sat on there with you since I was the one in the intergovernmental committee as
Yeah.
well. So we can continue giving truthful information to the public, frankly.
Okay. Well, we have no control over what the county does with intergovernmental. It was their decision. We're just trying to have a seat at the table and informational, and they want positive relations, not people yelling at the CEO to be fired. So I think we've got our ad hoc folks here. So does anyone else have questions or comments?
But we do have someone here that's yelled at people, including our own staff in the past. So I don't appreciate that type of a comment from you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Speaking
And you're
of what
putting
you-
them on the ad hoc committee.
You just said this out loud in a meeting, and I'm repeating that that's not what we want.
Have I yelled at anybody there?
Fine.
Okay.
Can we
Point of
move
order.
on? Do you have something, Councilmember Burns?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Are other jurisdictions creating ad hoc committees for this purpose as well?
Other jurisdictions such
For
as.
example, the county or?
Yes,
or
they,
what other-
they started this conversation. Two of the supervisors, I guess, went to two of the board members to say, how can we get better information? What can we do to, work together? And the supervisors had their meeting and they decided to form an ad hoc committee. And we were invited to have a seat at the table so that we would know what was going on as well. And that's
Okay.
how it came about.
So now one of, and city manager, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a fire ad hoc committee, do we not?
Yes, we do.
And my recollection is, in that particular case, that meeting is actually open to the public, isn't it?
I believe it is, yes.
And so, I'm going to support this 100% because I think, information is critical, but I would like to lobby for it to be open to the public. And my recollection is the fire committee it's really a working group in progress, and they don't take public comment. They're just able to come in, sit and observe. And so I'm going to support it, but I'd ask that maybe we pursue the opportunity for it
I
to be in
can
a
find
venue.
out. I
Yes.
don't know, since they have
Right.
created their ad hoc and the county, and so I
Right.
can find out more once we
And
get
the
there.
hospital ad hoc, they're a government, a quasi
Entity
government.
as well.
Right, yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
So I would assume that
I can find out.
the
more about
rules
that.
would be applicable in all venues. So anyway, all right. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, any other?
When
Questions?
when we're gonna meet again?
They have to set it. We have to
Yeah.
all figure out dates.
Thank
and time. Okay. All right, so do we have public comment on this item?
No, ma'am.
All right, so can I get a motion to approve the item?
So move.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries 4-1. We'll move on to item 2, the resolution number 2023-140, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Hollister authorizing the interim city manager to accept 3.267899 million in FAA grant funding for the Hollister Municipal Airport Runway 6 Safety Improvement Project. Can we have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the item before you this evening, our team at the airport had applied for a grant through the FAA for the Runway 6 Safety Improvement Project. And we did receive word that this grant was awarded via the FAA's website and some initial communication with them. They are in the process right now of preparing the documents for the grant, and that will probably come before staff sometime next week or the following week. So we brought this item forward to ask for the delegation of authority for the interim city manager to execute that agreement when the dollars come in. We did provide a brief summary of the project itself. And so this is out of our airport improvement program. And it's a grant program that funds infrastructure projects such as runways, taxiways, signage, lighting, and airport markings. And so airports are entitled to a certain amount of funding each year based on passenger volume. And so if the capital needs exceed the available entitlement funds, then they can supplement the entitlements with discretionary funds. So the entitlements were about $2.8 million, and we were able to secure just over $3.1 million or $3.2 million, excuse me. We do have an item coming up next that speaks to the actual work that's being done, and I will speak to that one next for the contract and the construction of that. But what we were trying to do is bring this forward and allow for us to receive the grant funding, execute that agreement, hopefully next week. And I do want to point out that the grant does require a match of 10% of expenditures. And what we typically do, staff have already worked with Caltrans. We typically get a grant to cover half of that match. So we would be, once the grant is accepted, we would be working with Caltrans for that. I can't represent it's 100%, but they've already indicated verbally to our team that they would be able and willing to process that.
Okay, thank you. So let's go through any questions. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. So, city manager, what does the grant award mean in physical work, and how are we going to benefit as a city from that work being done?
Okay, so I'll give a brief update. What it does is it removes the for runway 6, our inline taxiway. It removes a portion of the existing parallel and connector taxiway C, and the construction of a new connector taxiway at runway 6. The design services also include, we're going to be working with, excuse me real quick here. We'll be working with the State Water Resource Control Board on the project as well to make sure we're in compliance there. And the scope basically brings us into compliance. It also removes taxiway pavement and the edge lighting system and runway end lights and the regrading of that area to FAA standards. And it also provides modifications to the existing underground drainage system to accommodate the new configuration, removes a portion of the parallel connector taxiway C, all the electrical drainage and utility modifications to the system, and then also the installation of a new connector taxiway at runway 6, and reconfiguring of the apron connection pavement as needed for the project. So it will bring us into compliance. It will bring us up to current FAA standards and allow for us to receive the grant dollars as well.
Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions from council?
So when was this grant applied for?
It was applied for in late 2022.
Okay, and that was by city staff?
That was by city staff, yes.
Yeah, the only other, thank you. The only other thing I would ask is next time something like this pops up, it'd be neat to have like, what is runway 6 and stuff like that. I didn't see I just like to know stuff like that.
Yeah, we can update the the record to include it. I do have an item here that I did not get into the packet, so my
Oh, okay.
apologies.
Oh, no worries. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any public comment?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I would ask that maybe we put up some sort of a advisory billboard and do some sort of press release on this. I think this is great news and surprisingly relatively quick. 2022 is pretty good in my mind. And I think a lot of times that kind of work just happens matter of fact and people don't realize. And this is a big deal. And so I'd like to make it a big deal because I believe it is a big deal. And you know, I don't know whether we get Parks and Rec to go out there and put up balloons and do something quite that crazy, but you know, some press release and maybe a sign up as the work's going on. I think that could be very helpful. And again, it shows a great city work ethic as well as partnerships. And those are very important in my opinion. So
I'd be happy to. The staff over there is small but mighty, and they get in there and get it done. And we're really appreciative of all their work.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. So can I get a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to item 3. Resolution number 2023-141, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Hollister authorizing the interim city manager to award a contract to Granite Rock for the Runway 6 Safety Improvement Project. Staff report?
Thank you, Mayor. So to follow up, so because it was an entitlement grant, we were certain that we would probably get some level of funding. So your staff took proactive measures to bring forward back in January at the January 17th meeting, a request to issue sealed bids for the project. And so those bids came in. We did receive one qualified bid from Granite Rock. That bid came in at $3.2 million. And because of the timing of the awarding of funds, we were kind of butting up against the amount of time that Granite Rock would hold the price for the quote. So the way the bid was originally written, they held it through June 22nd of this year. Due to the timing, they are willing to hold it another 30 days. And so what staff is asking for is for the delegation of authority for staff, particularly myself, to execute that contract upon receipt of the grant funds first, and then work with Granite Rock to execute the contract within that time frame to hold those prices. As you know, prices never seem to go down, so we want to make sure that we can solidify this and limit our exposure of additional match that we may need to bring to the table.
Okay. So do we have questions from council? No? Do we have public comment?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Do we have any other discussion or deliberation? Or are we good to vote? Nope, looks like we're good to go. All right. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. We're going to move on to item 4, resolution number 2023-142, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Hollister adopting the fiscal year 2022-23 and fiscal year 23-24 GAN appropriation limits. And we have our staff report.
Madam Mayor, good evening. Casey Astorga, Administrative Services Director. And if I may, I'll provide the report for both items 4 and 5 at the same time, even though there are 2 separate actions that are presented to the City Council tonight, including item number 4, which will include a public hearing. There we go. With that, oops, there we go. Thank you, Paul. We are here tonight to discuss the fiscal year 23-24 recommended budget. And with that, it'll include a brief introduction from our interim city manager, David Marioni. I'll hand it over to David.
Right, fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Astorga. So as you may know, we were here before you 2 weeks ago to discuss the draft recommended budget. At that time, our department heads all gave a presentation to outline the work of their departments. the changes in their budget positions they had requested, one-time expenditures. And in that discussion, we took feedback from your council. We had also indicated that there was some work that we were going to go back and make some adjusting entries, which we have done. And so the budget before you today covers those items. We do have a few items to touch on towards the end of the presentation for direction. With that, if we are so fortunate as to receive adoption of the budget, we will go back, program that in, and that gives us the authority to begin spending on July 1. So I'm going to pass it over to Casey to begin and give you a walkthrough, and then we'll be happy to answer questions along the way. Casey.
Thank you very much. Waiting for the slide to move forward. There we go. Thank you very much. So the agenda for tonight, and you can look at this as the first bullet point is agenda item B4, and the second 3 bullet points are related to items B5. So first we'll talk about our annual appropriations limit, also known as the GAN limit. I'll provide some background and an explanation of the calculation. Next, we'll talk about the summary of positions, just a follow-up of what we discussed on the June 12th meeting, a summary of our 23-24 recommended budget, and then consideration of adoption of the 23-24 budget. So first, the appropriations limit. So what is it? It's called the appropriations limit by law, but it's also known as the GAN limit. It is California state law. It's incorporated in the California state constitution. It was first approved by voters in 1979 with a overwhelming 74% majority. It was also amended with Prop 111 in 1990, amended a handful of rules that we will reference later. And just as a footnote, Paul Gann, the gentleman that helped draft the GAN limit, Prop 4, is also the co-author of Prop 13. So in general, those types of provisions are a mechanism to limit government appropriations. How does it work? Generally speaking, it's a very nuanced and quirky set of rules, but generally speaking, the rule is related to the collection of taxes, which is separate from a fee or a fine or a penalty. This is really focused on the collection of taxes. And so there's some examples there: sales taxes, property taxes, transient occupancy tax, also known as TOT or the hotel tax, and other types of taxes. The appropriation limit will limit, it must be calculated and adopted annually every year to coincide with a fiscal year. There are annual changes that are based on growth factors, and we'll talk about what those factors are and how the calculation is made. And in general, if the agency overcollects a tax, the portion that was overcollected must be returned. How do we calculate the growth factor? There are 2 main variables. The first one is a cost of living variable, and that is identified as the annual change in California per capita personal income. So that is a must as our first variable. The second variable, we have an option based on whichever is greater, whichever serves the city of Hollister in a better capacity for the calculation. So we have the option of identifying the percentage change in the city's population or the percentage change in the county's population growth as our set of variables. And all of this data comes to the city of Hollister, comes to all public agencies through the state of California's Department of Finance. Here's a sample of what that calculation looks like. This is again partially provided by the state. So in this example, the per capita cost of living adjustment, in this example, it's 4.44% increase. This also has an example of a negative 0.35% decrease in population change, whichever variable was selected. And it shows that the top 2 lines, the per capita costs created into a ratio, same thing for the population turned into a ratio. You put all those together to come up with a growth factor. And so the example at the very bottom shows that growth factor in this sample, 1.0407, and how it relates to the prior year's limit. In this sample, $20 million. You apply the growth factor and you calculate a new year limit at that $20,814,000. So that's how the calculation and the formula works, including what variables are considered to do the math. This is the document that we received from the state of California showing the change in population for the municipalities within the county and then the unincorporated area as well. So on the top one, you see 1.51 growth for the city of Hollister, where the unincorporated area grew at 0.49%. And that is for fiscal year 2022 through 23. And the bottom portion is for 2023 through 24, the upcoming fiscal year, where the city of Hollister grew at 0.61% and the unincorporated areas declined at 0.56%. If we look back at recent history, Hollister's recent appropriation limits, starting with fiscal year 2020 through 21, our appropriation limit was just over $20 million. However, our unaudited taxes collected were at that $21.7 million. Same thing for the subsequent year in 21 through 22. Our appropriation limit using that same calculation methodology was at $21.113 million. However, our unaudited taxes collected were just over $22 million. So for fiscal year 22-23, the city did not adopt an appropriations limit, but the math still rings true with that traditional formula. So the appropriations limit for 22-23 was at just over $23 million. However, our projected year-end taxes collected are at $24.5 million approximately. So as we use that same formula to build out our 23-24 fiscal year appropriations limit, we use that same methodology to get just over $24 million, $24.2 million. And the budget that's being presented tonight has a potential taxes collected at $25.3 million as part of the budget. Using that traditional formula, the city of Hollister has recently been slightly just over the annual appropriations limit. However, and I want to point out that that is a big however, staff needs to confirm the historical formula and the variables that were used to conduct that equation, quite frankly. There are a lot of provisions built into the law that allow public agencies to recalculate. And one of the explicit factors by category is if there has been a transfer of financial responsibility for providing public services. And so a series of years ago, the city of Hollister undertook the operation of several public services, including the city of Hollister Fire Department and our animal control department. So we undertook that fiscal responsibility to expand our scope of work. And so our understanding right now is that we need to recalculate, and this does go back several years dating back to the inception of the law. So that's what staff is looking for in terms of our recalculations and coming back to council. And we'll see that in a couple slides here. So again, staff will analyze if there's an impact and how it impacts not only the city of Hollister, potentially some of our neighbors. If our appropriation limit increases, it might also impact the county's appropriations limit and might also impact San Juan Batista's appropriations limit. We don't have that information yet. That's something that staff is going to analyze. The example to the two items that I spoke about before, the city's population served without those fire and animal control services is roughly 42,000 people. However, when you incorporate that fire and animal control services, our population served ranges between 63,000 to 65,000 individuals. So a significant increase. Staff's recommendation tonight is to adopt a resolution to establish the city of Hollister's appropriation limit for both the current fiscal year 22-23 and for the upcoming fiscal year 23-24 at the limits identified below. And this does include some next steps for staff to report back to the city council based on our research and findings with subsequent recommendations. So that is item B4. I can pause for questions or I can move forward to the next presentation about the budget in general.
Sure. Let's have some questions. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. So you just concluded by talking about the fire and the animal control. And those contracts have been existing for a period of time, as I understand it. And so I don't dispute what you say, but when are we going to get back to the county to renegotiate those contracts so that they're paying their fair share? And that's just my summation. I'm speaking for me, Tim, that they seem like we're absorbing more and more of the cost of that. And so for me, it's an issue.
If I may, a meeting or two ago, we did receive consensus to start going through those records, and we've begun that work, and we'll be engaging in conversations with the county. So we did have direction.
Right. Any sense for timing on it? It feels to me like we're about to potentially authorize a budget where we're overpaying because others are underpaying. So is this something that we could have maybe bring back before council in 3 months or 6 months?
Oh, it would certainly be within 3 months.
Okay, thank
Certainly.
you. Thanks. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Resendez, no. No. Okay, Vice Mayor.
So, did I hear it correctly that you're going to go back to, how far back are you going to go back to make sure that the appropriate formulas were used for the past fiscal years? And then when can we accept that back? And then is there an amendment process that we need to go through? Okay, so
Yes,
you'll explain what the cleanup work will have to be.
Absolutely. So in general, the cleanup process will be frankly looking back to 1979, where the formula started, and doing some math. It's fairly straightforward formulas, but it's we're going to have to reach out to our partners, certainly in the county here, but also potentially to the state, to clarify how that transfer of financial responsibility impacts the equation. And then at certain injects throughout that formula calculation period, because it compounds year over year for those past 40 or so years. So we will go back to day one, and it's just rebuilding that. And I think that would potentially take us 2 to 3 months. And then based on that, if we do need to amend our appropriations limit, that would come back to the city council. And certainly there is, if from the top of my mind, if I remember correctly, the law requires a 60-day window for the public to provide some input on that process. But subject to that process, it could then be presented to council and adopted.
And if we did collect more taxes, would you go over also the return and what that would look like and the notification?
Yeah, yes, if that were the case, it's something through, I think it's Prop 111 that was called out there. It defines what that process would look like. There's a portion of it that goes back to the state, to the schools. There's a portion of it that would be returned directly to the taxpayer potentially, but it's still a giant if right now.
Just looking at the preliminary numbers, looks like that was the case, but you never know.
Mayor Casey, if I may add to that, just for context, when the state last year did their middle class tax refund, that was a GAN limit, triggered by a GAN limit. So.
Okay, you just answered my question. I was like, okay, they return the money where? So you just answered that. Thank you, city manager.
And there's also a provision to schools. So what you would do too is dig in. We have many joint use agreements with the schools locally. So we're bringing this forward. We don't see it at this point as any need for alarm, but it is work that we're going to be doing and bringing back.
Okay. And then I just had one more question, which is, so we've been looking at the tourist occupancy tax and raising that. And if we're kind of going over our limit now, is that going to affect what we're
It
attempting?
would definitely be part of the research.
So that is something we have to keep in mind.
TOT does count towards that.
Okay, thank you. And that's all the
You'll-
questions.
You'll hear our admin services director many times say that's a tax, not a fee, not a tax. And that's where a lot of that comes.
Okay.
So.
All right. Do we have any other questions or can we take some public comment?
This would also be the opportunity to open the public hearing as well for this.
Oh, right. Sorry. I will now open the public hearing on this item. Do we have any public comment?
Not in person. We're just gonna double check online. Just one sec. No, Mayor.
Okay. I will now close the public hearing on this item. All right. Do we have any other questions, deliberation, or are we ready to vote? Can I get a motion then?
Mayor, I do have a couple
Yes.
of questions about the overall budget.
Okay, are we
That's
going to
next.
cover that next
We're
in the
gonna cover
next
that
item?
next.
So
I
to the
think
will
it's
of
a
council.
separate
So this one
voting.
is specific, item 4 is specific to the appropriations limit. So the action could be specific to that.
Okay.
Item 4.
Okay,
right.
so we'll vote on that first and
Okay.
then we'll carry
Real
on.
good.
All right, can I get a motion then, please?
So moved.
Second,
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on. Number 5, resolution number 2023-143, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Hollister adopting the annual budget for the City of Hollister for the period July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024. Take it away, Casey.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, City Council. So tonight is consideration for budget adoption, and this will be for the fiscal year 2023 through 2024 budget adoption. And that must be adopted no later than June 30th of this year. And that allows us to appropriate funds, allows the city council to appropriate funds and authorize staff to spend effective July 1st, which is day 1 of our new fiscal year. Again, just a refresher, the organization chart of all the city departments, certainly answering to the community as the voters and the representatives, passing on that authority and responsibility, quite frankly, to the city staff to carry out those service objectives. Just clarifying on the right-hand side of the screen, this budget does make clear that engineering is a dedicated department, that Parks and Recreation is now a dedicated department in those 2 different categories. And also you'll notice that Public Works has that new branding as Public Works, which was formerly known as Community Services. Also, we'll talk about budgeted positions, similar to what we talked about at the June 12th meeting. So this was included in your packet. This is just a sample of the itemized list of all the authorized positions in the budget. And with that, we brought forth at this June 12th meeting, an addition of 5 full-time equivalent positions in the budget. And council did provide us direction to move forward with these additions. And they are, as presented on the screen, the animal control officer assistant as 1 position, the fire captain dedicated to training as 1 position, a police sergeant as 1 position, and then a veterinarian and veterinary technician, each as 1 position. So that grand total impact will increase our budgeted positions from 219 up to 224 positions. So that was the direction received at the June 12th meeting. As the city manager mentioned, there were some administrative changes, so there are no impacts to the total FTE counts. There are some changes, some additions and deletions of potential costs. And so we met with departments. One of these is my specific department on the finance side, but also talked to development services department director to understand what their service needs are, but also what the labor market is going to lend to us. And so with these add deletes, as we sometimes mention them as, we would be adding 1 senior support services assistant, 1 SSA, senior SSA in the development services department, which would coincide with the deletion of 1 development services technician. And then in the finance department, adding a accounting manager, 1 accounting manager position, and deleting 1 senior accounting technician position.
And just to point out, both the positions that say delete are currently vacant positions. So this does not impact any existing staff.
So over the past couple of weeks, staff has incorporated the direction we received at the June 12th meeting, both from city council and as well as some administrative changes as the city manager mentioned. We incorporated direction about travel and training funds, discretionary funds. We've updated our insurance costs based on what we received from our risk manager, the insurance company, also known as Mbasia Insurance Board. I apologize, they're not a company. We've also, at the last city council meeting, PlaceWorks contract amendment was approved. So we amended that cost for the inclusionary housing services, as well as just some general cleanup to essentially perfect our projected expenditures and our revenues coming in, because some of them there is a cost tied to the revenue in that calculation. So we've done that math and incorporated in general very few changes across the board based on the input we got on the 12th. That includes our draft CIP will be presented back to council in August. That's going to be separate from what's presented tonight. So we'll have some ideas about what those projects would look like, the funding sources associated with those capital projects, and then certainly a timeline too. If there's something that can happen in this next fiscal year, if they cannot happen this fiscal year, that'll be part of that CIP as something to keep on our radar in the future. Again, the same one-time operating expenditures as summarized here on the screen, same exact one-time expenditures that were shown on the 12th meeting. So those carried forward as part of this draft budget. Our revenues based on our analysis and calculations only changed slightly, and they certainly coincided with that similar change on the expenditure side. And so this is that graph projecting out how we've done year over year, but also in the purple column, just over $41 million in general fund revenues. As we perfected the math, we also clarified the dollar amount and the percentage of total on general fund revenues by type. And that's where I just want to note that other category does include the $9 million Measure W sales tax transfer. So that's where you see, if you do the rough math here, talking about our appropriations limit and the calculations of taxes, you can roughly get that $25 or so million as shown on the pie chart here. Similarly to revenues, we did the same for expenditures. We took the feedback that we received from the city council on the 12th meeting. We did the math associated with those moves. And that's where you see on the purple column on the right-hand side, that $48.8 million in general fund operating expenditures. Again, by type, looking at the general fund budget, but specifically by type, and you see personnel being 65% of our total costs, contracts 15%, services and supplies, kind of the tools needed to do the job 17%, and then a small portion capital project set aside. And then looking at it through a different lens by function. So our general fund operating budget by function. And so this shows kind of the 4 different categories and how we provide services to the community, public safety being 57% of our budget, development services, which includes planning, building, cannabis as 14% of our budget, quality of life, which includes public works, all those different divisions within public works, and then administrative expenses. So all the support staff that are typically behind the scenes, finance, HR, et cetera, city manager's office, city clerk's office. This is our general fund revenue projection. As we've talked about in the past few meetings, relatively flat based on the information that we're receiving from our consultants and the data that we're looking at personally. However, we do think that whatever we might be in right now, if it is a recession, that over the next 3 to 5 years, it'll go back to more traditional growth, which is somewhere between 2 to 3% on our general fund revenues annually. And as a summary, so our general fund summary level, the blue columns are the total available funds through the revenue and fund balance. And then the black columns are our expenditures. And so you certainly see that our available funds outpace our expenditures, as was reflected on this chart, as is reflected in the fund balance summary that's in the packet, et cetera. So we had talked about the general fund for those past series of slides. Here's also a 30,000 foot summary level of all funds across the board. And that's where you see in the bottom left corner, total expenditures of all funds, $98 million. And this is how it's split up based on those same 4 categories: public safety, quality of life, development services, and then the behind the scenes admin expenses. With that, we do need council direction tonight on 2 items. So if you can provide direction to the city manager about the business grant program, and then also separately, the economic development manager position, it had come up at the 12th meeting. So if there's any follow-up direction to the city staff from that. So with those, we'll need 2 additional pieces of direction. And talking about our next steps, again, as I mentioned in one of the first slides, to adopt a budget no later than June 30th, if it's the council's will to adopt it tonight. And then from there, once we have an adopted budget, staff will publish that budget both online and then prepare budget books that are available to all council members, but certainly here available at City Hall. Staff will apply for the GFOA budget award. That's something that is, we take pride in that because it's a best practice. This budget document is being designed based on those best practices, and it's not only to guarantee that information is accessible to individuals, but it's easy to digest. It's easy to navigate. You can click on a certain section of table of contents and it brings you directly to that. It not only includes the numbers and the data, but also represented in several different ways. It talks about our community. So there's a series of elements that are requirements in order to get the award. The city has received the award several years in the past, and our plan is to apply for it once again. And the most important part is that final bullet point. That's when staff gets to implement city council's priorities as adopted through the budget. So with that, staff does recommend that the city council adopts a resolution that would adopt the fiscal year 23-24 recommended budget. And with that, we're available for any questions or those direction on those 2 items. Thank you.
Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a few questions, only a few, and I do have a few comments that I'll reserve until after. Going through the document as presented, one of the positions that appeared to, it was redlined, so I really didn't understand it, was there's currently a position, code enforcement manager. And my understanding was when we moved code enforcement to the police department, that the code enforcement division was overseen, I guess would be the right way to say it, by a but a police sergeant. And so if that's accurate, does that mean we've got another position that's either funded or not funded? And is there an opportunity to do something with that? Would be my question, because it doesn't seem like we need it.
Do you know what page? That's not ringing a bell that it was a code enforcement manager. We didn't make any removal of positions.
No, it was there. And it was highlighted in red, which is why it immediately drew my attention.
I wonder if that was part of the MOU, which is the previous item.
Yeah,
Because-
it may have been.
I mean, we can double check that. We certainly didn't remove any
Right.
positions.
Right. And so, but that position, would that have been figured in the total number of FTEs?
It would have, yes.
So then if we were to eliminate that position, then the reality would be we'd be one fewer employee.
That's correct, but that's not my recollection of
Okay.
what was in the
Okay,
authorized.
maybe
FTEs.
just something to look at further. I wasn't clear on that, and I was satisfied that the PD doesn't need a code enforcement manager if they have a patrol supervisor or a supervisor performing that service. So thank you.
Ms. Councilmember Burns, in reviewing the documents, that is not a position that we have budgeted.
Okay, all right, thank you. And so we also talked a little bit recently about a police lieutenant position that's underfilled. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so, but it's budgeted for a lieutenant, correct?
Correct.
And so I guess, and I don't know if this is a budget question or a personnel question or none of your business, none of your question. But when will we move forward to fill that position? Because if I understand, it's currently filled by a sergeant. So if the sergeant, a sergeant was promoted to fill that position, it just seems like there would be some additional movement and the money is already set aside for that.
That's correct. So we've budgeted for both the sergeant level position, if PD would like to fill that, but also budgeted for that lieutenant position at the same time. So at the point where the transition happens to fill the lieutenant position, we would have budget for both of those classifications.
Okay.
To fill both of them.
All right.
And
All right.
Chief, did I get that correct, or anything else to add?
No, that's correct. And that's our intent, if it's approved today, to move forward with the process of filling that spot, the lieutenant position and the sergeant position.
Okay. All right. Perfect. In one of the pie graphs, you showed the percentage, and I want to say it was like 17% of our total our total general fund expenditures are for what I interpreted as outside consultants.
So I think on the general fund budgeted expenditures by type, there is a section. It's on page 148.
I think it was the contractual side.
There are 15% for contractual services at a number of just $7.1 million, just over 7.1.
Okay. And so what are we going to do to move that to FTEs? That seems, 15% seems like a fairly robust number to me. And so I have, maybe it's more of a comment than a question, because I don't know that you have an answer, and I don't know it'd be fair, but since I've already jumped down this path, I really want to see us move to reduce that number to full-time employees. And I know that other members on council have expressed similar things. And so I knew we spent a lot of money on consultants or contracts, but I didn't realize it was that much, frankly. And so just a comment. I'm not trying to put you on the spot here.
I can speak generally to that because there are budget
Okay.
policies that talk about that type of analysis. And so what our city's budget policies direct staff to do is to conduct a cost benefit analysis about the level of service that can be provided, but also how and when the funding source can support that transition. So it might be something where year one of those types of transitions are front loaded with cost because you potentially have to pay for both services at the same time to do a warm handoff. So that's the type of analysis that staff does in recommending whether it might be, transitioning from X contract to add a certain number of full-time equivalent positions in the budget. And so staff does that analysis and certainly did that as part of this budget process. And it's part of it's related to the timing of when the fund, in this case, the general fund, can support that warm handoff, which in some cases doubles the cost for a period of time, 3 to 6 months of time.
I get that, particularly, I guess, within building services with a building inspector and a chief building official. But in some of these positions, they've been vacant for a period of time. And so I think a warm handoff is very optimistic, as opposed to, no baton to hand or no hand to hand the baton to. And so again, I'll save more of the comments for later, but can you, is it going to be under CIP or somewhere else? Where we're going to talk about the $1.5 million for the fire truck, potentially, I don't know, $3 to $5 million for a communication center, and other costs.
Exactly. Those are all part of our capital improvement project plan, identifying what those total costs are, what variety of funding sources may be available, and certainly the timing when those projects would happen.
Okay. All right, Mayor, thank you. Those are my only questions for now. I do have a couple of final thoughts. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Resendez, anything? Councilmember Perez, Vice Mayor.
Yes. So thank you, Councilmember Burns. That was one of my questions. So I do want to emphasize the contractual percentage is really high, and I would also like to see that transition to FTEs. Also on the next chart that you have that talks about public safety and the quality of life for all funding sources. I've never seen that before in terms of that percentage. The quality of life is higher than public safety. Can you explain how that comes to be?
Yes, and so it certainly includes some of our larger enterprise funds, which will include sewer, water, wastewater, all those types of funds that have a dedicated external, if you will, funding source. And so you add all those together compared to which are primarily funded through the general fund, the public safety, police and fire, even though they do have some supplements. So when you look at public works in general, including those very large enterprise funds, that adds up to be just a hair above public safety.
No questions other than to echo Councilmember Burns and Morales about bringing things in-house. I'd like to see us move in that direction too. So I think we could take public comment at this point.
Yes, we have Renee Wells, followed by Amy Paris.
Mayor, we will have a discussion on the two outstanding items that need direction as well.
Renee Wells. Oh, sure.
Thank you, council members, Mayor. You don't start with an unusual request right off the back, but my name is Aaron Johnston. I'm with Granite Rock Company. Granite Rock Company is a 123-year-old locally owned private company that just gave you a smoking deal on an airport contract. So I'd like to get a chuckle out of that. That was generous of us. I also represent the 1,000 families that we have for Granite Rock Company, and we care about where they live, work, and play. And so it's very important that we volunteer our employees for making it a better community. And to that end, I've been volunteering with the Economic Development Corporation of San Bernardino County for 7 years or so. I apologize in advance. It's unclear from the 500-page document of the budget if there's inclusion for the continued funding of that program. So if there is, I've always been told, when you make a sale and it's closed, stop talking. But I'm not sure at this point. So I'm going to continue to talk a little bit longer. We've worked with Brian and staff, and we've had support from the mayor, of course, through the various programs, including the SEDS. But I believe that MOU is in draft form right now. And I would like to just highlight the point that the SEDS is a very important 5-year comprehensive economic development strategy. It's renewing the expired SEDS right now. And there's a lot more money available this time around for our community for projects that the 47 people who volunteered to get that document to the public comment place where it is now would like to see it go. Some of those projects are also will benefit directly the infrastructure of the city. So I apologize for the the awkward thank you or plead, but depending on your direction, I'm available for additional comments, and we have staff prepared to explain more about the SEDS. We also have consultants online ready to go talk about the importance of the SEDS, and we have another volunteer board member ready to talk today. So with that, I'll cede my 58 seconds for maybe some clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we get a little clarification, city manager?
At our previous budget hearing, we did receive direction to plug in $100,000 for 1 year for EDC and $100,000 for the HDA for 1 year. That is programmed in to our fund that, or to our account that funds nonprofits. And ultimately, it's your discretion to adopt. So if you adopt as presented, those dollars were programmed per consensus at the last meeting.
Thank you for that. So we have more public comment.
Renee Wells, followed by Amy Paris.
Good evening. Thank you for the clarification. We weren't sure, so we were prepared to plea. I just want to say thank you so much for continuing to fund the EDC. We worked really hard on the SEDS. I have been with the EDC 2 years, and I've worked really hard to try to bring tools that will help us do matrix in the future. We have them all in place, And we really want to work hard for the city and show you that we can bring you what you need in the city and county. So I thank you in advance, and I hope you will approve the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Followed by Elia Salinas.
Okay, move on.
Elia Salinas.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. So there was a line item up there with regards to a position for economic development position. And I'm wondering, why would the city want to hire an economic development individual for the city when we already have the Economic Development Corporation? And we also have a committee for economic development where most of the municipalities sit at the table to discuss bringing in economic development to the entire county and each city. So I don't believe that the funds should go to a position where the job is already being done. The job has already been done. Ms. Wells came in, and when she came in, COVID was here. So that was hindering a lot of the nonprofits to go forward, and that was hindering just the world when it comes to economic development. So I don't understand. I don't feel that it is important to try to fill that position. I think you should let the corporations and this new ad hoc, because it's something that just started this year, that should go forward to see what it can bring to the city of Hollister, to the city of San Juan Bautista, and to San Benito County. And I realize that you're only representing, obviously, the city of Hollister, that's your interest, but this entire committee that's gathered, and they're all volunteers, and are working and bringing in ideas for the entire benefit of all the municipalities. So I would hope that you don't plan on filling this position anytime soon, so you can let this go ahead and process through. If you find that for whatever reason, you don't feel that this organization is bringing anything to the city of Hollister, then that's something that you can think of, but you also have to consider the political, the political stance that's out there right now with actually, wanting to stop growth. If you're out there adamantly saying you don't want to grow, you're not going to bring economic development. So as a whole stance for the council, you should try to welcome growth and welcome that welcomes economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers?
We have Stephen Wallstrom.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
You're
Good
very
evening.
low. If you could speak up, please.
Sure. Good evening. Can you hear me?
A little louder if you could.
How is that?
It's better.
I'm sorry. Mike, I've been working with the EDC for a year on the SEDS as a consultant. And the reason I wanted to talk was because Aaron Johnson covered it. I was unclear, as Aaron and others have been, about the allocation to the EDC, and now you clarified it. And I'll just say I'm here to answer any questions you might have of the consulting team about the SEDS, if you have any. But I think my comments have been covered already. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the public speakers. Oh, one more. Andrew Shelton.
I can make it quick before we reset. Perfect. Andrew Shelton, I'm with Shelton Insurance. downtown Hollister it's our 44th year on Main Street. This Councilman Perez, thanks for checking on us. It means a lot for somebody for an elected official to reach out to a small business. Just making a comment on a voluntary capacity here with the EDC. Just to continue the funding for the organization, which thank you for putting that in the budget. Remember getting involved with EDC during the first SEDS process. This 5-year document gives an opportunity to ask for funds via grants. And again, congratulations on the airport grant. I know that was direction that you guys followed and it's paying off. EDC is not a non-political entity. We've learned from this process and opportunities made available due to the past few years' situations, which have been touched on by other public comment. Current findings from the data and content from the draft document, which I encourage you all to have a look at, shows specific projects to fund, a workforce that lives here due to recent growth, and also a workforce that needs development. So this is why I think that one of the reasons why I stay on the EDC board is to make sure that we're meeting those needs. And I just think there's a real opportunity for what's out there, what's being made available to us as a community that goes far beyond the city limits, but concentrate on the city first. So thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for what you do on this on your boards. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no more speakers,
No
Mayor.
more speakers. So I know we have to give some direction. Do we want to have more discussion first? Yeah. Go ahead,
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman.
So I'm curious about what dollar amount the city of San Juan Bautista contributes, as well as the county. And is that information available somewhere? Do we know?
Are we talking EDC specifically?
Yes, I'm sorry.
The county contributes $100,000 this year. They did. We contributed $100,000. San Juan, $8,000.
Thank you for the clarification.
Eight.
It used to be 5, I thought,
Mhm.
but I would also look for moving forward. Well, first of all, 100% support, but I would like to see a breakdown of where the workload is distributed. If we're going to contribute 50% approximately, 47% maybe, I'd like to hope that we'll see at least 47% of the work based in the city of Hollister. And I recognize there's a value on a county-wide level, but I'm still looking for measurables. One of the things I would push out for council's consideration is I'm fine with $100,000, but I'd like to see some sort of performance metrics and maybe even installments. Initially, I thought maybe quarterly $25,000 towards it so we can really measure it. And I know that it's been a heavy lift with the new director coming in a year ago. And so, and we've gone from no support to what I'm hoping will be 2 years in a row. I know that the initial ask was for 5, but I need to see some real measurables beyond the SEDS. And I'm still not clear on what did or didn't actually arrive as a result of the work out at the airport. I've heard some contradicting comments, and so I don't know. Having said that, I would like the council to consider maybe $25,000 installments on a quarterly basis with a report that goes along with that, so that we can absolutely share and see what the outcomes are of that. And so, Mayor, I have other thoughts and comments not related to this conversation. Do you want me to hit pause and go back so council can follow up, or do you want me to just roll through my laundry list?
What's the preference of council? It doesn't matter to me. Does it matter? Just go one item at a time?
Sure.
To get consensus? Okay. Then, did you want to go, Councilmember Resendez? Anything to add on that?
No, I think I've made my position pretty clear in regards to EDC. I don't support any funding for their organization.
Okay. Councilmember Perez. Vice Mayor?
Yes, so I do support economic EDC. I do have concerns about, so we did approve $100,000. I don't know how that money was spent. My understanding was it's supposed to be part of the SEDS, but when we looked at the report, the city of Hollister was not part of that recognition. So I'm assuming that money didn't go to that and it was through other things. I also am not sure of any of the performance measures, which partly is part of the city's contract compliance and monitoring. So not necessarily anyone's fault, but maybe our own in terms of making sure that the deliverables were done. I also, in line with a lot of the other things, I'd like to see that the city of Hollister pay proportional to the entire county so that we're all paying a percentage and contributing to a total cost. I don't think that the city of Hollister should always pick up the majority of the cost for the county or for San Juan Bautista. I like to see that change with many of our contributions that we make. I do feel that the economic development position is essential. We are, if not years, but months behind the infrastructure bill. We were not part of drafting or creating or advocating or at the table on any of the discussions on broadband or airport or anything else. We need someone to be an aggressive advocate, not just for the city, but with our community and EDC to make sure that we are at the table when those decisions are made, that part of that funding is kept out for our region because we qualify for a lot of things. We're just not applying for that. I feel like we absolutely need a position that is completely dedicated to aggressively going after money, collaborations, reporting, auditing, and also working with the city directly in the various departments to get things unstuck. And the only way that you can do that is by having an internal person being able to look at efficiencies, process, workflow, and outcome measures. And so I strongly advocate that we absolutely need to fund a position and support the EDC because we need to have any and all measures moving forward to be able to address all of our needs.
Thank you. I echo much of what everyone is saying. I see the value of having an internal person, and we are way, way behind as far as economic development. Like I said, I did attend the SEDS last workshop. It was really impressive, the things that are being achieved. I know you're ramping up. We've got Amy on board now, and I was glad to hear about the tools that you're putting in place so you can give us those metrics that are so important to us, and we're all going to be looking for them. So that's all I have to say, but I support both. I support the EDC and the position. Councilmember Resendez.
Thank you. I see the conversation talking about EDC, but then I'm hearing we're trying to get consensus for the new staffing position, and I echo the same sentiments as the two previous speakers. I would like to see an in-house person. I think it's vital for our community, and I would certainly support that. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember.
Since we kind of went from one to the
Go
other,
for it.
I'll check this off and that'll save the next comment after that. But I've actually worked in economic development department while I was with the city of Visalia, and I absolutely saw the value and benefit to it. And it didn't prevent the county from doing their thing, the city, and having the umbrella as well. And so for me, I think Vice Mayor Morales covered a lot of my thoughts on that as well. And I think we need to do it all. And even though we're uncertain in our economy, now's the time to launch it, in my opinion. And so what I've heard city manager from what I've heard on the dais is that there's support for that as well. So
Right.
I'll pause for my next comment when you're ready for me, Mayor.
So I think we do have consensus for both.
Yes, and I believe I saw Councilmember Perez
Oh,
as well.
sorry, go for it.
I do see the importance of EDC and it's in our community, in every community. And I do, it would be easier if we can, the measurables, the application stuff you got going on, that's going to show us more. That's going to be a lot more easier for us to digest and chew on. Thank you though.
Yeah, I think just one point as we create the position and move forward. If the EDC is successful, they're creating a tremendous amount of work for our team and staff. And so that position would work in tandem with them, as well as the comment that Councilmember Morales made. You're almost a Sherpa through the process to get your project from point A to Z internally with the city. The discussion at our last meeting was around housing that position in a central location like the city manager's office to help folks if there's attraction and those businesses come in, they're going to need someone to hold their hand. If you look at the items on the SEDS plan, many of those that are the projects that are identified in the city, that will be staff work. It will not be the work of the consultants or EDC. That, you know, if we're successful on that, writing the grants and then executing upon the grants, if we're so lucky to receive the funds, is a lot of staff work. So I appreciate the support.
Okay.
Mayor, what I didn't hear, I think I heard Vice Mayor Morales talk about some sort of a metrics for payment that I suggested, but I really didn't hear any other conversation on the dais about that. So I don't, again, as we give staff direction, I don't know if that requires more conversation or what the other council's thoughts are on that.
Would you like more input on that?
Yeah, traditionally, what we've done in these situations is once the MOU is drafted, they've received a singular check at the beginning of the term. So if it's the will of the council to either divide that into installment payments, do a reimbursement contract, that's at your discretion.
My only thing is I don't want to make more work for you to have to cut checks every quarter, but I'm open to whatever the will of the council is. Yes.
Yeah, we absolutely have to do that. These are public funds. I would suggest a fee for service agreement. And that adds to the reporting, how the money's spent and what is our return for investment.
Tim, you were saying quarterly?
I did, but again, I actually think the vice mayor's suggestion is more definitive and will actually show the value. And so I would support that.
Me too.
So Mayor Casey, if I may, did we get consensus for a fee for service agreement?
What would that look like?
What that would look like is that when we draft an MOU, I'm hearing deliverables, we would monetize the deliverables. So you will do 7 of this for $1,000 each for a total of $7,000. You would do another 20 of this for $2,000 for $40,000, and basically work on a deliverable schedule up to the $100,000 amount on a 1-year contract.
What's the rule? Okay, I think you have consensus.
Okay, then I will work with Ms. Wells and the team to bring that back.
Okay.
So the other item that we need direction on, this budget does not contain funding for a business grant program. We had done the business loan program before. We had funded 4 loans. We had received direction to pause to work through those loans to get those 4 funded. They've been funded for a few months now. They're up and running and on their way. And so we wanted to bring that back and get final direction of whether to program dollars into the budget for a potential grant program. We have received some interest from between speaking with the EDC, who has referred or has a few on a waiting list. I would say from the onset of the program, just short of 10, including the 4 that received loans. When we talked originally, there was mention of, if there was a program that the folks that got a loan could apply for the grant. So outside of those 4 that received loans, at an interest of about 6 that have come to either through me or when I checked in with the EDC.
Okay, Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple other comments before we wrap it up tonight, but in response to the city manager, I don't think at this point in time that I have a desire to move down that path further until we have a stronger history with those that we've done. And so I wouldn't support that personally. Thank you.
Can I ask you quickly, clarification, what the grant program would look like? Can you kind of give us an idea? Because we're talking about waiver of fees kind of grants or something I seem to recall.
So the grant program could be however we get direction to design it. I mean, there's initial grants for helping businesses get on their way and get started. You could look at a potential similar to Adam is left, but with Growing Hearts, there was a request for a fee waiver. One could classify that as they got a $1,500 grant this evening. Those are fees that they would have paid to the city to help flesh out their idea and see if it was viable and start understanding what they need to do if they wanted to execute on their idea. And that's the whole point of that meeting. And so there's many different ways you could do it. So you could do it from that standpoint. You could do it from your traditional grant. During COVID, there was grants that were, X amount of dollars per employee. You could do grants for to provide training. The sky's the limit on different opportunities. You have, because it's general fund, it's really the discretion of the council if they choose.
Councilmember Resendez, any thoughts, questions? No. Councilmember Perez?
I'll reserve my comments.
Vice Mayor, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
Yes, I'd like to sunset that, and I think if there are requests such as like Growing Hearts, that they come to City Council for review and approval on a needed basis. I think there are a lot of complexities that we faced during the last year in trying to get something started. It is not within the city of Hollister's kind of area of expertise to have the various elements that were unforeseen circumstances. So I think it's to our best interest to sunset and then bring items, to council for review.
I don't have questions right now, but do we just want to, any other further deliberation, or are we pretty much? I have a feeling, I like the idea of helping a business getting started because it is very expensive to do some kind of nominal grant thing, but I understand the work it makes for you, and given our economic uncertainty in the future, maybe a sunset of this is the best, and we could revisit it later if things, turn around. We could always look at something like that in the future.
Mayor, also, if council were to receive a presentation, we do have that, assuming we adopt the budget this evening, the discretionary funds.
That's true.
And that's not a lot of money as it relates to development, but we can look at these things on a case by case basis as they come forward, because certainly we want to support good businesses and growth, but right now I would agree with the Vice Mayor on the sunset. Thank you.
Okay, I think you've got direction on that as well then.
Yes, thank you.
So is that it, or do we have any other direction?
So that was all the direction that staff needed. I want to thank Casey for presenting the budget this evening. If there's no further questions on the budget, I think Councilmember Burns had a list. So we'll take those questions now.
Perfect. And this will be quick as well. So first of all, as the city manager just did, I want to thank you. I want to thank Casey. I want to thank all the department heads. You guys did an amazing job. You made this easy for a lay person like myself, and I appreciate that. I also want to take a special moment to recognize the police and fire chiefs and their departments. To have the public safety budget be 57% is a significant accomplishment. I've seen them up in the 70% range, and it really restricts the other things, and that's good fiscal leadership as I see it. I've heard the fire chief say that in a previous presentation that he felt he had an adequate budget, and so this is really good news for us as a community. It gives us other opportunities to spend money where otherwise we wouldn't be able to. So thank both chiefs, thank your staffs, please, and continue to do this great work. I also wanted to, this is just a little bane of my existence, and for our Public Works Director, I love that name incidentally, thank you. That's so much better. But I'm still gonna pester you till the day I leave, and then I'm gonna find you afterwards. I desperately want to get some sort of a paint crew, prefer full-time employees, a litter and graffiti control crew. As I walk the city, and I walk fairly frequently, it's going from marginal to less marginal, and I'll pick my words wisely here. And as I was coming in this evening for the meeting, somebody actually went up and painted, I'm hoping it was graffiti driven, but one of the entrances to Sunny Slope Village, right at the corners, and only the corners, but they actually did a very good job from a distance. And I'm fearful that it's now the residents doing that. And the residents shouldn't have to do that. If they want to, kudos to them. But I desperately want these positions to do this work. And unlike the wastewater treatment, it's not rocket science. And so we really need to find a way to cover those. And I've been begging for this for 2.5+ years. And so I'm going to keep pushing. I wouldn't want to hold up a budget or even suggest that, but I want these things for our community. And it's just not District 4. As I drive, I drove down Ladd Lane the other day, and again, I'm seeing it in different places, and sometimes it's just graffiti, but I think most of our painted sound walls have been deferred maintenance for decades now. And so, Mayor, with that, I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Resendez.
Thank you. I too want to echo the same sentiments that Councilmember Burns did. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Thank you, Casey, department heads, and all of your staff. I have been on the council, I think, the longest, and this has been the most clear, transparent, and professional process as far as obtaining a budget. So thank you for that. However, we have heard some talk about possible recession moving forward. It's important to know that staff follows the direction of the council. We set policy, staff follows the direction of the council. I have no regrets about how the direction was executed and how the process was executed, but I cannot in good faith support this budget. The previous council, even before I was on here, was paying down our debt, and they were working very hard to ensure that we were being very fiscally responsible of the public dollars, and that just not has been the case with this council, my colleagues here. We are stewards of the public funds. We have a responsibility to ensure that we are budgeting properly and that we're planning for our future. That has not been the case. And I'm sad and disappointed in the decisions that have been made up here and the policy that's been set. I cannot in good faith support this, and I want to make my position very clear. Thank you.
Councilmember Perez.
I just want to thank staff. City Manager, can you tell me those numbers again? How many we've had, just how many we've had, the items? I don't know if that's possible. Never mind. Never mind. I just want to thank staff because you know what? I, unlike any previous speaker, I think the city's in great shape. We're doing good things. You know what? You know, you can tell the morale of people, their attitudes. Look at our attitudes. Everyone's, you guys rock. You know what? Keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to keep supporting you.
Vice Mayor, would you like to add?
David, are we passing a balanced budget today?
So you have a structurally balanced budget. It is using 7.8 on the general fund. It's using $7.8 million of available fund balance. And on the overall budget, just over $2 million of available fund balance out of $98 million in expenditures.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that that was heard for the record. And I do want to thank staff. I did this year. It was phenomenal work. I know that everyone spent a lot of time preparing their budgets, their outcome measures. It's the first time that I've seen the budget explained in such a way and easy to understand for our community. So I know that you worked really hard. I know that your divisions worked really hard. So please, thank you so much. Thank all of your staff. We appreciate the work that you do. We know that that we are being very fiscally responsible with our funds, making sure that we have a balanced approach to meeting our community needs as presented by our administrative service manager, very well documented and presented. So ditto, and thank you for the wonderful work.
You've all said it all, but actually I want to say thank you because this was my first budget and it can be very overwhelming, and you all made it so much easier. I saw the work put in, the way you explain things, and I really feel like others on this council that we are headed in a really good direction. I'm loving the interaction between our new staff, and we're achieving things, and I can see the future's bright. And so thank you. Thank you all for all your hard work. Appreciate it. All right. So if we don't have anything else, I think we can make a motion.
Madam Mayor, I'd request that we do a roll call.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'd be proud to own this and make the motion
Me too.
to move this budget forward.
Okay, can I
Second.
get a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Mayor, I
Yes,
requested a roll
aye.
call.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Resendez,
No.
Councilmember Morales.
Yes.
Councilmember Burns,
Absolutely, yes.
Mayor Casey.
Yes. All right, motion carries 4-1. All right, with that, I think we can make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Glad we didn't put money on that now. They were joking about when it was gonna finish. Tim said 7:30.
Yep.
You don't want to. Right. You can get letters if you want.